We are putting our final thoughts together for the 2024 NFL draft class as the Dolphins reach the 1-week anniversary of finishing their collection of new talent for this year and beyond.
You are Locked On Dolphins, your daily Miami Dolphins podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
All right, Miami, welcome to another episode of Locked On Dolphins. It is your team every day here on the Locked On Network. I'm your host, Kyle Krabs, a lifelong Miami Dolphins fan, host of Locked On Dolphins, co-host of Locked On NFL Scouting, also the author of Touchdown Miami on Substack. You can find all of our shows here on the Locked On Network or YouTube or wherever you listen to your favorite podcasts. Tip of the cap to our everydayers because it is your team every day. We don't just say it, we live it here on the Locked On Network. It's Friday, May 3rd. Today's episode of Locked On Dolphins is brought to you by Monopoly Go. I have a competitive side. It loves getting its itch scratched with Monopoly Go, the mobile hit twist on classic Monopoly. So join your friends and download Monopoly Go now free on the App Store or Google Play. I have a couple different angles that I want to bring through here on this final 2024 draft class recap. We'll get into UDFAs next week. Still kind of finishing some of the film study on those guys, but want to be able to come to the table and say, here's the guys I think have a really good chance of making an impact in training camp and potentially pushing for a 53-man roster spot. But want to start with the ideology that I think was interesting that the Dolphins applied throughout the course of this draft class. Obviously, they went with superbly physically gifted players at premium positions in the first two rounds with Chop Robinson and Patrick Paul. I do think Chop Robinson, as you kind of get into a little bit more, I've started expanding this week as well, getting into a little bit more of the Mike McDonald Baltimore Ravens scheme that we're expecting that Anthony Weaver is going to bring a lot of over to Miami. I do think Chop Robinson, passing downs, and then obviously early in the season, there is a need, depending on what Bradley Chubb and Jalen Phillips' status is. I think he's going to be a pretty consistent presence for the Dolphins, particularly on long and late downs in 2024, with a lot of upside for untapped potential yet for him. And then Patrick Paul, probably not going to get playing time. I'd be surprised if he surpassed Kendall Lamb in year one. This might be a player where you see some de facto jumbo packages, though. Get a sixth offensive lineman out there with somebody who is really athletic and could line up as a sixth offensive lineman or a tight end. Like, I would not be surprised if that kind of thing happens with Patrick Paul. When they were asked about these two guys, they said, we certainly have visions and plans for ways in which everybody can contribute to the team in year one. It doesn't always manifest that way. But I thought the rookie contract element was really underscored as I just went through and I updated all of the salary cap table that I have for the Dolphins, and it's the offseason roster, and I just put the rookies onto it, and it's really underscored when you see with the rookie wage scale, Chop Robinson this year, $2.7 million cap hit, $3.4 million cap hit in year two, $4 million cap hit in year three. Jalen Phillips, conversely, with his contract, he's in the fourth year of his contract, $4.4 million. Patrick Paul this year, $1.25 million, $1.5 million in 2025, $1.89 million in 2026. Lots of layers. But those two picks with big-time ceilings, with small-time cap hits, even as top 50, top 55 picks. That is when you talk about positional value in the draft game, this is one of the ways in which it really matters. I think the other side of that coin is drafting Kyle Pitts at number 4 overall, and he comes into the league, or drafting Saquon Barkley at number 2 overall. And those guys come into the league with this rookie wage scale and their top 5 contracts at their position just based off of their draft positioning. So I think the hope is, amidst all of the other talent that's available in these two rooms, these two supremely gifted, physically gifted players can help to realize their potentials. And if they do, Miami's cap health for 2025, 2026, 2027 looks very promising as a result of these kinds of investments. This is part of the game that the Dolphins are playing, and it's not guaranteed success. That's important to remember. It's not a guarantee that Patrick Paul is going to reach his ceiling. It's not a guarantee that the day three guys are going to be the steals that a lot of us think that they are right now. It's not a guarantee that Chop Robinson will fully realize his potential as an every down player. Like, all of that is the unknown element and challenge of the draft. And that's where I think when you reflect on what the Dolphins have done with some of their draft picks the last few seasons, it changes the cap game, but at least you know you're getting established assets that what you know, and you have to walk that tightrope, and the Dolphins are doing that. And they're kind of getting ready for the next phase of this collection of team operations and salary cap and roster management as they get ready to pay some of the young players that they have. And I know, because we just watched Robert Hunt and Christian Wilkins walk out the door, it feels like they're never going to sign anybody to a contract extension ever again. We're sitting here waiting for the Jalen Waddle contract extension amidst other wide receiver contracts, and everybody's wringing their hands saying, oh boy, here we go. It's going to be Christian Wilkins all over again. It's coming. It's coming. The other draft ideology thing that I thought was interesting was the usage with the late round picks. And everybody's a little different here. But I look at the selection of Taj Washington and Malik Washington and Patrick McMorris in particular, and even to some degree Muhammad Kamara, after the 5th, 6th, and 7th round draft picks. I look at those players, and everybody kind of feels differently about how you apply late draft capital. Heard Howie Roseman talk. I think it was their debriefing after the 2024 draft. And he talked about the day three guys being a lot of guys that they like to go after physical tools players. He had name dropped Jason Kelsey and Jordan Mailata, who was an Australian rules football player who never played in college, and they drafted in the 7th round off of the athletic profile and his potential, and they've since developed him, and that is in large part because of the presence of Jeff Stoutland, the offensive line coach there, who's been a staple for Philadelphia for a really long time. I want to make sure I get my numbers here. Stoutland's been the offensive line coach in Philadelphia since 2013. It's been a decade. It's been a really long time. And I know Kansas City's another offensive line development spot. People look at their offensive line and they get green with envy, and they say, man, I wish Dolphins would treat their offensive line like Kansas City does, right? But I think both of those two spots are great examples of what has escaped Miami. And Jeff Stoutland's been here since 2013 as an outstanding offensive line coach. And you get Jason Kelsey and you develop his game. And his game kind of takes the next steps with Jeff Stoutland, and there's consistency with the coaching. Jordan Mailata comes in the league having played American football at the college level, but because of the tools and the consistency and stability of the offensive line coach amidst head coaching changes, they developed Jordan Mailata. Well, Kansas City, they get a good break in Creed Humphrey falling to them in the 2nd round a few years back, but Trey Smith was available because there was some concerns with blood clots that cost him some playing time in college. But even their offensive line development, I think about a guy like Andrew Wiley and some of the interior guys that they've had that they've gotten quality playing time from. Their offensive line coach has been there since 2013. Miami's had 9 offensive line coaches since 2013. And I think that's where we look at this draft class and we think about not using an early pick on an offensive lineman. And I think some of the school of thought is, hey, let's get some consistency in this room with how it's coached and how it's communicated. And the Dolphins since 2019 are in the upper quartile, shout out Jim Irsay, of teams in the NFL for draft capital used on the offensive line. They're 7th in the league in most draft capital used since 2019 in the offensive line. You have young guys in the pipe. Young guys that, as Austin Jackson alluded to earlier this week when he had a virtual media availability, this is the first time in his career, and he was drafted in the 1st round in 2020, He's not had to go back to square one with the coaching staff with a new offensive line coach. And we've had the same talking points about Tua Tagovailoa. So this wasn't the original point that I wanted to make talking about Philadelphia and day 3 picks. But it is a nice little sidebar for a talking point I was planning on bringing to the show. Why not now? It's Friday, casual Friday. That I think is weighing very heavily on me as I'm sitting here thinking, I don't think they're done personnel-wise on the interior offensive line. I still think they're going to bring in a vet. We'll talk about a little bit more of that in rookie signings in the third segment here. But when we come back from the break, I do want to finish the thought that I had about what Miami's ideology was on day 3, particularly the 5th round and later. That's maybe a little bit different than some other teams. It doesn't make it right or wrong. But it's the better you understand how they are approaching some of these investment opportunities, the better you can understand the team and the why of how they're making roster decisions and better anticipate the next time a draft comes around as well. So that's coming up next here on this episode of Locked On Dolphins. Make sure that you stick with us. It is winner take all in the NBA and NHL, and FanDuel is giving you a shot to bring home a big win of your own. Right now, new customers get $150 in bonus bets with any winning $5 bet. That's $150 to bet on spreads, money lines, player props, and more. Visit FanDuel.com/lockedon and make every playoff shot count with FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. So let me see if I can get myself back on track here. The day 3 application for Miami, the 5th, 6th, 7th round, Muhammad Kamara, Malik Washington, Patrick McMorris, Taj Washington. These were players that I thought all showcased high football IQ, high football intelligence, situational awareness, some fundamentals. They get it. They're not balls of clay. And I think there's a lot more upside and a lot more ceiling and developmental upside with the early picks. And I think you look back at some of the other draft classes that Miami has. I think Cam Smith qualifies in that regard. I certainly think Channing Tindall qualifies in that regard. Guys that with the earlier picks in each respective draft class, there's a ceiling to reach where I don't necessarily know that the ceiling for the day 3 guys, they're not shooting for the moon with developmental upside to secure stars. But they went after high intelligence, high football IQ players that I think have a certain baseline that has the potential to contribute if they can work their way through their own respective physical limitations, which is why they were available later in the draft. McMorris, not the most dynamic player, but really smart, really tough. Muhammad Kamara, not the longest edge player. A little bit more of a linear player than Chop Robinson's, a little bit more of a fluid, like dynamic 3-dimensional playing type athlete. Kamara's a little bit more prone to run through you. Convert speed to power. Not the longest arms or wingspan. Malik Washington, undersized, 5'9", 185. Ran in the high 4.4s, 4.47. Not the blazing speed that other guys that could go in the 4th round, like Anthony Gould and Jacob Cowing got drafted based off 1/10 of a second, but really smart player, really good with his routes. I think all of those kinds of things are applicable here as I think about, okay, there was an opportunity here that the Miami Dolphins chose to embrace to try to find players that they felt like their circumstances and their roster and their scheme could help accommodate players that weren't a one-size-fits-all player, but illustrated football IQ at a high level. And we'll see how that plays off for them. And that kind of is a nice parlay into 53-man expectations for this draft class. I think long-term and short-term. I will say this. I generally expect Miami to carry at least 5 rookies on this 53. I expect Jalen Wright, who you trade a future 3rd-round pick for, makes the roster. I expect Patrick Paul, who you used a 2nd-round pick on, makes the roster. Chop Robinson, your 1st-round pick, is going to make the roster. From there, I think Muhammad Kamara, based off of the injuries in the room, is a very, very strong bet to make not only make the roster, but play rotational reps for you on the edge. This is a very rotationally heavy defense if it's going to look like what it looks like in Baltimore. And then I do think between Malik Washington and Taj Washington and Patrick McMorris, I'm giving the inside track to Malik Washington. I think there's a very clear attraction with his skill set and what the Dolphins want to do offensively. I think there's a little bit more toughness and grittiness with Malik Washington that Taj Washington plays hard. I respect his work in the slot, and he brings good effort and strain in all aspects of the position. But the most elusive receiver with the ball in his hands in college football this past year, amongst qualifying players with 50-plus targets, I'm inclined to think that guy's probably going to get a look and probably going to make this roster. And who he ends up bumping off is a different story. I think with the wide receiver room in general, you look at that full thing. Hill, Waddle, they brought back Berrios for a decent amount of money. Ezukanma, I think they have some visions for, and he is a very skill-specific type of talent in that wide receiver room right now. So that would be 5 with Malik, Braxton, Eric, Jalen, and Tyreek. I think the numbers game comes down to how many tight ends are you going to carry? You're going to carry 2 again, and is it just going to be Durham and Jonnu? Are you going to carry 3 and carry either Jody Fortson or Julian Hill? How many running backs are you going to carry? Malik Wright's going to be a part of that mix, so that puts potentially Chris Brooks and Savon Ahmed on the bubble. I think both of those guys maybe on the outside looking in was my expectations going into camp. Now, you got to go out and you got to execute, and there's going to be injuries and all that kind of stuff. Like that, it's not a lock. But I think Jalen Wright's not only going to make the 53, I also have expectations he's going to have a considerable unique role within the backfield for the Dolphins. Is that at the expense of Jeff Wilson? That's kind of where my head's at with this draft class. And that's not to get into the UDFAs, but there's a couple of intriguing guys. I think there's not necessarily anybody that I look at and say, man, I can't believe this guy went undrafted. I think he's a really good bet to make the Dolphins roster. But we'll get into that group next week on Monday, starting on Monday. I want to next get into the rookie signings, where the Dolphins stand with the salary cap, where the Dolphins stand with the cost of their rookies themselves, where the Dolphins stand as we get ready for the next phase of free agency, which for Miami is going to open on June 2nd. After the Xavier Howard money clears, all of that is going to be coming your way next here on this episode of Locked On Dolphins, so stick with us. Timeout. Got to take a timeout. We got to pause here and talk about Monopoly Go. And I can already hear what you're saying, Kyle. You gave Monopoly Go the shout out at the beginning of the show, flag on the play. What gives? I just want you guys to understand how dynamic this gaming experience is. In Monopoly Go, you can team up with your friends for timed tournaments where you work together and build up each other's boards. And the more you win together, the more awesome prizes you can unlock. There's a lot to get, like unique stickers that you can trade with friends to complete albums for big prizes, cool new playing pieces to travel the boards with, and emojis for taunting your friends as you smash their buildings and heist their vaults. Plus, Monopoly Go feels new and dynamic and exciting every day with constantly changing tournaments and challenges. There's a ton of unique mini games that you can play. There's always timed events that can help you win big. There's massive multipliers for everything you win and rent frenzies. There's always something fun to discover on Monopoly Go. So get off the bench and go download it now free on Google Play or the App Store. Game on. We're back. So, full transparency here. This podcast was recorded at about 11 o'clock this morning. And then about 11:30, it was about a 30-minute program, I hit end record and got off to the news that Odell Beckham Jr. was signing with the Dolphins. So that blew up the original talking points. And some of the talking points you probably already heard as far as the 53 for the wide receivers. But the rookie signings and the salary cap element of this was up in smoke, right? Because Odell signing 1 year, $3 million contract with incentives up to 8.25, and the timing of signing rookie deals. The crux of it's the same, but I wanted to re-record this, and I love re-recording segments, especially after I did a whole other show on Odell. So I did a show Then I did the Odell show, and now I'm coming back to the original show that I did to redo the third segment. So I'm piecing and rewiring the whole thing together in my brain. So I appreciate that the patience as I give you full transparency on how the sausage is made behind the curtain here. Miami is going to be fairly tight against the salary cap until June 1st, unless the team comes to a contract agreement with Tua Tagovailoa, or if the team parts ways with another veteran player. And then I think there's a few that are worth being mindful about, that being Duke Riley, on the books for $3.5 million. You could save almost $3 million if you moved on from him. They brought in Cam Brown as another undersized, speedy special teams linebacker. Is that do you feel comfortable pushing him off the roster? Probably not. If you had a player who put your feet to the fire, a veteran player, be that a safety or a guard, whatever, they're going to be pretty tight between now and June 1st unless one of those other things happens. 5 of these 7 rookies from the draft class will not count at all against your offseason top 51 salary cap, because their year one totals, as based on the rookie wage scale, which is the higher you get drafted, the higher slice of a pie of a fixed amount of money that rookies are able to get. That's not adjusted for positional value. Their year one values do not surpass the 51st ranked contract for the Dolphins right now, which is about $1 million. So Jalen Wright, Mohamed Kamara, Malik Washington, Taz Washington, Patrick McMorris, those guys can sign, no ramifications whatsoever. And the team could fit Patrick Paul. Patrick Paul's difference, his year one salary of his 55th overall rookie wage scale, allotted money share is about $1.25 million. So you're only going to lose like $250,000 in cap space by signing him. The Dolphins can accommodate that, no questions asked. I think the Chop Robinson one is a little tight. That one might wait. And the original talking point was, if a veteran had urgency and wanted to sign, I would probably wait and not sign Chop and Paul to have a little bit of wiggle room to get you through June 1st. The Dolphins just used some of that with the Odell Beckham signing. So it was pretty prescient. Good foresight. Somebody's going to correct me on that. And I won't read it. Good foresight for Miami to know, hey, the wiggle room to come out of the draft to sign a player is meaningful. It is valuable. And they've already used that, where that was my original observation was, don't be surprised if they kind of string out some of the rookie signings to get you through to the Howard money clears, just because if a vet does want to come and make a commitment, you want to have the flexibility to sign them, because some players might have a sense of urgency to sign with a team at this point in time. That's happened with Odell. So we will get into undrafted free agents early next week. We'll get into who might make a push, who might make some noise. I'm really looking forward to diving into that. The Dolphins, of course, have had a lot of recent success with undrafted free agents. But if you're watching this show first, stop. Go get caught up on Odell Beckham signing with the Dolphins. That show dropped around 12:15 this afternoon. This show is going to drop around 2 o'clock this afternoon. Get a nice Friday doubleheader, May 3rd, 2024. And I'll be back on Monday. We'll do some film study. We'll see if any other breaking news happens. If it does, I'll be back. Gotta stay flexible in this space. And this is the time of year where you're thankful for the news. And I'm certainly, the draft is over. Training camp's about 9-10 weeks away. I am more than thankful to have the opportunity to have something to really dial in on and really get into the weeds with. And the Odell Beckham signing gave us that. And this is our final debrief from the 2024 NFL draft. So if you guys enjoyed our program here on Locked on Dolphins, it is your team every day. We don't just say it, we live it. I am out of here. Fins up. Talk to you all again soon.